According to CNBC, Trump says crypto regulation bills that failed to advance earlier now have the votes to move forward. Welcome to Between the Lies podcast, your weekly lesson on how to approach an uncertain world with positivity and balance. I'm Nicky P, here with my good friends and money brains, Luke Tatum and Rob Brayton from Perfect Spiral Capital. Gentlemen, how is this headline hitting you today?
Great. More regulation. Um, yeah, I, as I was thinking about this, it's like, do we really need more laws? Especially as it pertains to currency. But, I think there's always a little bit more to it. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today and just kind of unpack it a little and understand what these are. So, Luke, do you want to kind of give us a rundown, since you were talking about it a little earlier, of what they really entail?
Yeah. So I will just kind of explain. There's really three bills. I think this article that we're all referencing here, it's a CNBC article, and that is kind of the springboard we're using. But we've got really three pieces of legislation. The main one is the Genius Act. Okay, so the Genius Act is Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. I hate how legislation all needs to have a catchy, name, and like it's like the Patriot Act. How could you possibly be against something that's named after patriotism, right? But maybe you should read it. There's that kind of element here. And then the other two that we've got are the Clarity Act, which is, I guess, formerly known as the Digital Asset Market Structure Clarity Act, which is going to differentiate what is governed by which regulatory bodies. And then we've got the anti-CBDC, or Central Bank Digital Currency Surveillance State Act. So those together have all made up this thing called Crypto Week, which I guess it's like Shark Week, only for regulations. But there's, a whole lot of stuff, right? And as usual, you've got probably hundreds and hundreds of pages, and they're all just going to say, "Oh yeah, that sounds great," and just vote on it without reading it. So that's the state of things.
Well, let's start with the fact that we're expecting a bunch of people in the early 60s and 70s to even understand what's going on. I don't know if you've ever talked Bitcoin with anybody. Usually you get a glazed over stare talking to anyone like that. So I'm just imagining what our congresspeople or what their take is on this. But I kind of wanted to take this back to something Rob said, and it's regulation. Give me more of that. Obviously being sarcastic there. But, I've been taught growing up in America, obviously, that regulation and getting rid of regulation is what caused the 2008 financial crisis. It's what makes our lives worse at every step, is that they've taken away all the regulations in banking and made it too easy for people to do bad things.
Well, I definitely disagree with that. When you take the time, and I think this is the biggest part, right? Is most of the people that make the rules really count on you not to go back and really understand the history, really understand what's actually happening and what causes a lot of these things. And this stuff's been going on for decades, way back into the 1800s, even, about how what you've been told, or what the history books say is the way things were, just simply isn't true, and it's not accurate. And I think that's what causes my skepticism, right? I think that's where you got my first comment, is like, yay, more regulation. Well, I'm not against regulation if it actually stops bad people from doing nefarious things. The problem that we've had, and I see some of this, like the Clarity Act, for example, it's putting the control of some of these crypto assets or some of these things in the hands of the SEC and the CFTC, and they don't punish anybody. When's the last time they actually helped or sought the Justice Department to put label or leverage actual charges against someone who committed a nefarious act? In a lot of cases, and this is my opinion, they are actually protecting a lot of the people that cause some of the problems. Now, you can take that for what you will, but there's a lot of history that also backs that up. So uh, that's just kind of my thought on some of it.
I've personally always been of a mind that they put the rules there to establish the cost of doing business. What are fines other than, well, this is the rate that we charge for you to do this nefarious thing that we're going to let you do anyways.
Yep. Yep. Now, if something goes well, if let's pretend for a second we enact all this new legislation and some things really, really start trending in a positive direction afterwards, who's going to take credit? The government, right? They're going to say, oh my gosh, it's because we passed all this stuff. It's only when something bad happens that they go, oh yeah, it's because we deregulated this one sort of kind of unrelated thing 25 years ago. Now that's the problem. It has nothing to do with these new regulations, right? They always are happy to take credit, but then they're always going to shift the blame. It's that whole privatize the profit, socialize the losses mentality that you've got everywhere else in government, just applied to the regulations.
Far too often, the one thing government really loves to do is jump in and take credit for something that was already happening. And then usually you find out is that thing stops happening once they get involved. But
Yeah, I mean, lots of examples.
One thing that I'll say in this situation is, why did so many people want to create crypto in the first place? Uh, because the government has done a terrible job of managing the currency in the first place. And they've been centralizing all this power for so long, and people don't feel that they have an alternative. So that's where a lot of it started from. And then now you have government claiming, if let's say, like to your example, Luke, things go really well. Now they're going to jump on board and say they actually, were a part of it. Well, they didn't create anything. All they did was create laws that created problems that people solved for, and now they're trying to take credit for the new thing, right? So I think that's the weird part about it that I don't think most people are thinking about in this case.
let's paint the picture here. What is like the best case scenario that we see of these laws entering the market and moving forward? Like, what's the good that could happen, or that they think is going to happen, or they're pushing for?
Yeah, just one thing that comes to mind, clarity, the Clarity Act, what it purports to do is to better classify what coins are, quote unquote stable coins, what coins are more like a security and traded as a security as though it's a stock or something. And in theory, you could argue that's a good thing. It makes it easier to file your taxes. If you're filing your taxes, and trying to be very uh, very clear and concise and accurate with your tax reporting, maybe that clears some things up, and you don't have to go, I have no idea how to file this, and things like that. That's maybe an upside.
As business owners, like ourselves, we don't necessarily always know how to go into the future. Like when you're dealing with new things, because we don't know what the laws are going to mean. Right now, we're kind of in a gray area, and so at least knowing whether or not interacting with a certain, you know, crypto or using one of these devices is going to put us in jail or not. Do I have to risk losing everything just because I happened to use one form of crypto or another? A regulatory body having control that way and being able to at least make everyone feel like we're on a even playing field. There's positives to be wrought from that, at least as far as the market's concerned, and like our ability to function in it.
Yeah, I certainly see where it can, especially someone who maybe wants to interact with, in or even just use something within the crypto space. I can certainly see where it would help in that you know that these sort of coins can be counted on, so to speak, as a form of currency. And I certainly see where that can the Genius Act can help in that regard. Um, I think that, and on the same token, or on a similar token, I should say, like the CBDC Surveillance Act, I personally think that could be a very good thing, because I don't think we need a central bank digital currency. There's so many challenges that could evolve from that would just infiltrate into our day-to-day lives even more so than the government already has been. It's just not something we need. I mean,
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that would say with central bank digital currencies, we we don't really need them in here in America because we can already shut off your bank account and not let you do anything we don't want to if we don't want you to. Look at the Canadian truck. Look at the Canadian truckers. They had their stuff shut off up in Canada. So it's like there's perhaps not the necessity that libertarian folks like me, we get really concerned about the infringements and they're going to come in and well they kind of already can anyways. Maybe it'll make it easier, but do they ever need it to be that easy? They'll do it if they want to do it. So kind of moving along domestically, that's something that we see is positive. What is perhaps, let's say, the biggest thing that we see coming out of this is I think what they're telling us is going to happen with the dollar on the international stage, and that's that there's a belief that notice how there's not a lot of talk about Bitcoin in all of this. What all this really has to do with is establishing stable coins at the banking level here in the States. And what is that going to do for us here?
Yeah, I mean, so the idea of a stable coin is that it's got a pegged value, right? People that are buying Bitcoin, for example, or any number of other coins, you're doing that somewhat as a hedge against inflation, right? At least I would say the purists, a lot of purists are doing it there. You're not appreciating the price of Bitcoin, you're trying to preserve the price of your dollars, right? You're shifting money, you're trying to shift value into something that actually isn't decreasing in value. And the fact that Bitcoin's price is going up and up and up is a reflection of the fact that the value of the dollar is going down. Right? It's not actually becoming more valuable. That's one way to look at it. There are other factors. I know I'm oversimplifying, but the idea of a stable coin is that it's pegged. And so if you say, okay, well, I'm going to get this, I hesitate to use a specific one, Tether or something. If you use a stable coin, it's just the value of the dollar, right? It's just a digital version of the dollar. And so what does that do for you? I can go spend money right now. I can go spend US dollars. I mean, it doesn't, I don't know, Rob. I mean, what do you think here? Because it doesn't do anything.
Well, you can go spend US dollars. There's a lot of people in the world who don't have access to banking, let alone US dollars.
Which is where the play is, right? In with some of these stable coins, because it allows some of these newer nations or even nations that are maybe troubled, have a really poor currency, they can use these coins to do commerce. Like I can see the advantage there, and it allows them to operate essentially in something numerated in the dollar. I On the flip side, though, I honestly see the reason the government would want to be involved with this is I tend to look at it from a little different angle. I think they're trying to do it because they see that the US dollar is in serious trouble, and serious trouble because of the level of inflation we've seen. And if anybody doesn't believe there's massive inflation or serious troubles, what was your house worth in 2018 and what is it worth today? That's not the value of your house. That's the loss of purchasing power of your dollar. And that should tell you everything you need to know about what's going on. So I see this is a backdoor way to help prop up a currency that's really struggling, but yet everybody is saying everything's okay. There's nothing to see here. Now, is it still the best of the worst? Yes. I mean, I still love America. I still think this country is great, but we do have some problems, and there needs to be solutions on how to fix that. But we should be trying to fix the underlying problems of our currency as opposed to trying bolster it by layering in these other forms of currency to make ours look better, in a surreptitious manner or something like that.
Well, look better. I even struggle with that because, while we complain about how bad our currency is, we can't ignore the fact that all the same shenanigans that our government has played have been played in most other modern countries also. So everyone's struggling. Nobody's currency is worth anything. And so they're kind of all being devalued at the same time. What this does do is it gives a genuine alternative to places that wouldn't normally have it. And so it doesn't just make it look better. It does make it look. It doesn't actually make it perhaps marginally better in a world of terrible options.
I mean, theoretically speaking, on your point, Nick, like theoretically speaking, could it actually cause the dollar to be worth more? Yeah, I'm not going to doubt that it couldn't actually help. And if it does do that, I think that's where we would have a great advantage. To gain some purchasing power back would be amazing. I think that's something that's anybody you ask anybody in the United States right now, if we could get back a little more purchasing power, that'd be huge. So if that were to actually help by strengthening the dollar on the world stage and bringing some of that purchasing power back, yeah, I mean, I would be all for that. I just tend to be a little more skeptical about it.
Right. This has been something that has been discussed for, gosh, several years now. People that I know have been talking about the BRICS nations, and how they might have a gold backed currency over there, and so what's the American response to that? And to hear them tell it, and I'm not saying they're wrong because I've done some looking into this as well. The U.S.'s response to that, the plan has been for maybe 10 years at this point to do an asset backed currency, but the asset would be a digital item, not gold, not a return to the gold standard, but a return to some kind of digital asset. And so there's been a whole bunch of people speculating on specific coins and things about trying to get in at the ground floor on something like that. And who knows? I mean, part of the problem with the crypto markets is you're subject to things like this, where we're going to change regulations, and then all of a sudden you may have some major problems on your hand. Or just because a vote is being discussed on something, fluctuations in value, huge responses, because it's a relatively unregulated market still compared to other things. Something like commodity trading, like for, copper, for example, is way, way, way more regulated than cryptocurrency at this point. So you're going to see the most price fluctuations over there, and that it creates some difficulties if you're trying to say operate. If you're in the bleeding edge and you want to operate your business, say tabulated in a stable coin, or even better yet, a non-stable coin. Well, how are you going to do that when the price of Bitcoin was 68,000? A year ago, or less than a year ago, right? It's very, very hard to do accounting with something that's wildly different every day.
You need like demand based pricing on on your item that you're trying to sell because the market's constantly changing and fluctuating. So to create some,
I bought inventory at 60, and now it's 120. Like, what do you do with that? Just sell the inventory back? Like, I don't know. What do you do? So,
yeah, I mean, creating some stability there would obviously help. I think, what you were talking about with Bitcoin too is, I think everybody's most familiar with that, but it's generally, at least in the circles I've seen, Bitcoin's perceived as a store of value. And I think that's where, if there is any level of, you know, addition or like infiltration of crypto into a reserve status, I certainly would potentially see that there, but it's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot that goes into a lot of these decisions and stuff too.
Well, I would argue that's already happened. Um, that it being accepted into ETFs and all that. That was in my opinion, the final gasp of them trying to keep it from being what it was inevitably going to become. It's now too involved with people's retirement money that nobody could do anything about. No one's going to want to do anything about it because it's like, okay, well now we're gonna start screwing over the base because you've got people putting this in retirement accounts. You've got people like using it, and large corporations have too much to hold to let it devalue. It's like at this point you start screwing with it, it literally starts wiping out your entire economy, like just large scale problems. So now I don't feel the same way about the broader crypto market personally, but that's that'll be what it'll be. So as we're kind of winding things down here, let's hear like how much is this actually going to affect your day-to-day life? How much do you care about this really?
I'll be the first to go if that's okay. Um, because we talked about this before. I just said I don't really care because it doesn't bother me that much. And I hold some crypto, right? It's not like I'm somebody who's totally anti-crypto. I have some, but I just don't think about it on the day to day because of where I keep the majority of my assets, and that's because they always go one way and it only goes up. Like that's a big part of what we do on at Perfect Spiral. So yeah, I care. So saying not care is probably the wrong way to look at it, but I just don't think that it impacts me, and it probably doesn't impact a lot of people on the day to day, like some people make it out to.
Right, right. My wife and I tell her what I'm gonna be doing in the afternoon. I thankfully work from home, have for several years now, right? So I always have lunch with the family unless I'm traveling, and so I tell her kind of what I'm doing the rest of the day and told her we're recording a show, what we're gonna talk about, and we were just kinda laughing because I live in Arkansas, right? And so the amount of like crypto adoption in the state of Arkansas is probably pretty low. I mean, I don't have any stats in front of me, but it's not something that's going to impact me. I mean, Arkansas recently passed a rule where you can transact business in the state in gold and silver. So there's some new legal tender laws and stuff, and that's a whole can of worms we don't have time for. But as far as this, there's several cities around the state that have banned crypto mining because it puts too big of a strain on the electricity grid. They're worried about not being able to air condition houses and stuff. It's a fixed income environment out here, a lot of Social Security retirees and stuff. And so, is that going to impact my immediate community? No, it's not. You know, Beyond the way that it's going to impact the broader United States, the total economy, obviously that has repercussions. But I do think that all three of these pieces of legislation are going to pass. I don't know that, maybe it's not going to happen on the first time. It sounds like it is as soon as these votes got secured here. But, I think it is going to happen. And I think that what really matters the most here is what the rest of the world does in response, right? Because if the US is going to continue to have the reserve currency of, the world, the US dollar, the backing of the US dollar is a very significant thing. If they choose to position it as as an asset-backed currency in that way, I think that's a big deal. I think this is the first maybe step in that direction that we've seen in quite some time. But as you alluded to, Rob, I mean, the majority of our assets, we have real estate and we have life insurance cash values. We are very, very much into that, and it goes up every day. And so day to day, man, I mean, I'm kind of just living the dream in the best possible way. That's not a disguised call for help. Like I feel really good looking at my assets. So, uh, Nick, that's my first pass answer on that. I'm feeling all right.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's about good for today. Luke, why don't you take us out of here by telling people where they can go to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to navigate this and many other things that are likely to occur in your future, and you want some expert advice on doing that, perfectspiralcapital.com. You can book a time with Rob. You can book a time with myself, the rest of our team. Perfect Spiral Capital is dedicated to helping you do that. And we are education first platform. So we want you to know how to handle what's coming up in the future. And that's what this podcast is all about, I'd say. So again, perfectspiralcapital.com. I think we'll be good.